Welcome to the Investing Ahead podcast. I'm Tom Curran. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Brendan Kennedy. Brendan is helping us with the book, the presentation of the book and our audio book. He's been part of that. And I thought it would be interesting to bring Brendan in to speak from the point of view of a person with 3 children, wife, family, the challenges they face, what they think they need in terms of financial services. In the interest of full disclosure, Brendan is not a client of Curran Wealth Management. He is helped us immensely in understanding, communicating with the public, and for that I'm grateful. But Brendan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you think one of the biggest needs would be in terms of the general public and what they need in terms of financial advice.
Sure, Tom. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I definitely...
excuse me, one moment.
What?
I forgot to mention Straylight, which is your company and the company that we've employed, engaged to help us with the information we went out about Investing Ahead, the book, and the audio book. So Straylight is the name of Brendan's company.
Right on. Thanks. And I speaking of the book, I'm fairly familiar with it as we produce the audio book that's coming out soon. But I'd say, one thing people have a feeling about, the investment world is just that it's so complicated and so complex that they couldn't possibly understand it. And you do a really nice job sort of breaking it down into concepts, and you tell so many stories that really illustrate these concepts. But also, one of your overarching messages is really don't overthink it. There's just a few things that you got to do, and they're not necessarily easy things. But if you do them, you can get the kind of results that your clients are receiving from being your clients. But as you said, I've got three daughters, teenagers, and one just will be 21 soon. But they're growing up in a world where they're not, sure they'll ever be able to afford a house and have the sort of financial security, stability that earlier generations have had. And I think the way you explain how they might be able to do that is very encouraging to me. That there is perhaps a path forward to do that. And I'm just curious, what you might say to a 20-year-old about to enter the workforce. And
well, I think the first thing would be the world is different. The way you will move forward over these next working years in your life, in many ways will be the same as your parents, but in some ways it will be different. Let's take the big objective that I think a lot of people, particularly younger people, might have in their mind, and that would be, I want to own a home. And the question of, can they afford a home? How will they ever gather the down payment to buy a home? I think when I grew up, and Brendan, when you grew up, I think it was a foregone conclusion that it was important to buy the house. And I think in today's world, the question might start with, do I want a house? Do I need to own a house? Which is a question I never asked. But I think younger people today are thinking along those terms. And if I own a house, what kind of responsibilities does that put on me? So I think the good news is they're asking those questions. And I would say affordability might in fact be a bigger issue for younger people today than it was for you and me. But I think the other part of it is, am I better off renting and investing elsewhere, Might that be a better alternative for me given circumstances? Circumstances meaning if I have a family with 3 children, maybe a house is more important than if I have a family with 1 child or no children. So the first thing is I would say, well, if owning a house is really important, then you'll be able to do it. You'll figure it out, and there would be a road to that. But if you don't, there's another approach. So I'd be more optimistic than pessimistic.
Excellent. I'd love to hear that. While we're on the subject of houses, you have this chapter in the book talking about how a lot of people are sort of fixated on buying a house because they think it's going to be the big investment and it's going to have this huge return. But the way you break it down, you sort of illustrate that, yes, it can have a lot of value, it can have these things, but there's also a very long laundry list of expenses, like, for example, roofs leak and squirrels get in the wall, which actually happened to us when we were recording the audiobook. You have a chapter about squirrels and how, which I'm going to come back to you on. But if you could just talk about why a house might not be the sort of golden parachute that people think it's going to be.
Well, the first issue around housing is the rate of return. And when I tell people that the rate of return on residential housing is in the area of 3 to 5%, maybe 6% in more robust markets, Boston, California cities, they look at me as though, what are you talking about? How can that be? And so I like to tell the story about my parents. In 1950, I would have been 5 years old. They moved, like so many people did after World War II, to the suburbs. And they bought a house for $11,000, $11,000. And they lived in that house their entire working life and into their retirements. After my mother passed away, my father asked me about living in the house and what about selling it? And I said, well, Dad, if you want to sell the house, go ahead and sell it. Don't stay there for my sake, for sure. Talked to my sister. She said the same thing. And within a day or two, he called me and said, Tom, would you sell the house for me? And we did. And we sold it for about $118,000. But if you take the annual rate of return from roughly 1950 until the time they sold it, it was 3.5%. Now, 118,000 compared to 10 or 11 sounds like a huge return. And it is in terms of the multiple. But in terms of the annualized rate of return, it was about 3.5%. To that, you have to add the costs of all the improvements they made and the depreciation and so many other things. The reality is that real estate's a great investment. Residential real estate grows at something before adjusting for inflation in the area of 3.5%, 4%, up to 6%. That's what it is. It's not more than that. It's not 10% that stocks return over long periods of time. But the problem, I think, isn't so much the rate of return. The challenge for so many people is that it consumes to own and keep, in the first place, 35, 40% of their disposable income. So much of what they have is being used to get that. And I think the younger people are beginning to raise the question about, is it worth it? And the answer to that question is it's a personal thing. But it's an extremely expensive consumer of our income to have. And I don't think that our generations, the older generations, really understood that. But I think younger people are more into the metrics and the numbers, and I think that they're at least beginning to ask that question. So I think real estate's great, but there are costs associated with it. it consumes a great deal of our disposable income, and it doesn't appreciate. It's not going to be worth nearly as much compounded in real terms as people tend to think. What I'd like to ask you, Brendan, is when you go out there and talk to people in your community and the cocktail party conversation, what is it that people are wondering about in terms of their financial futures, their security, how they're going to pay for their retirements, how they're going to help their kids pay for maybe debt that they've taken on to get through college? What are people your age and your situation talking about?
Well, college is certainly one, because it's just so expensive now. $70,000, $80,000 a year for colleges that used to be, when I was when I was in college, there were, a fraction of that. And so, it's just a daunting number. Obviously there are ways to sort of help out with that with, financial aid assistance. But I think, that is one thing that I know also, in addition to not necessarily wanting to buy a house, there's a lot of kids saying, I don't need to go to college. And for some of them, that might be, a good thing. But I think as far as just generally, I'm 53 and have not necessarily employed all of the saving tactics that you so beautifully describe. But I do have a 401k that I've been contributing to for a long time, and it's definitely something I think about, and the sustainability of that, and just and how I'm going to age with the resources that I have. So that is definitely on my mind these days, as is, I have an old money pit of a house, my kids are about to be out of it. Is this a good opportunity to relieve myself of a very expensive proposition?
It may be, It may very well be. I know that, but I want to ask you a question about college. Now, when I went to college, I wanted to go to college. I was motivated to go to college. It was well before the time of student loans. I don't think I knew what a student loan was when I went to college. If they existed, I didn't know it. So when I went to college, my parents basically said, and I agreed, I'm going to college. And what that meant for me is I got on a train every morning, got a subway to Temple, and went to classes and did the reverse going home. There was never the option of spending money to go away. So I went, I did the state school route. But today things have changed. If I were growing up today in the same household, same circumstances, I think I would have been maybe trapped into thinking I've got to go away to school and it's going to cost $70,000. And again, this is an old man talking. Have our kids taken on this vision of what it means to go to college that maybe doesn't make as much sense as we'd like it to make?
I think there's definitely an argument to be made for that. There's, one of my twins, her freshman year was 2020, and COVID kind of derailed. She was a straight A student, and then she failed online gym, and
I didn't know they still took gym.
The way to fail online gym is don't tune into the online classes. But anyway, so she was like, I don't want to go to college. I don't need to go to college. And then about 4 months ago, she had some change of heart and decided now she does want to go to college. And we actually just went up and looked at a college this weekend, and she loved it and wants to apply her early decision. So but I think, there is a certain, there used to be a certain kind of guarantee that you'd get your money back, or maybe not a guarantee, but just sort of the concept that you would get your money back for college. And now that's not quite such a guarantee, especially if you've got student loans that are compounding, and the idea of maybe going to trade school or finding something. There's a lot of jobs out there you don't need college education or degree for, and so I think it's a personal choice. And I think there are definitely pros and cons to it, but the price of it is certainly daunting. I mean,
I guess I'm looking at it from, I'm not going to say my parents had a simple discussion with me. It was an easy one because they could offer me no options. That is, I was getting on the train, getting the subway, going to classes, and coming home and sleeping in the same bedroom I'd slept in through high school and junior high and all of that. I'm wondering if parents need to have a very serious discussion. And I'm not talking about you necessarily, but my sense is that parents don't sit down today with their kids and say, this is a huge expenditure. Student loans may help, but it's going to be a burden. And quite frankly, it's going to be a burden on us as parents. If it's a college education you really want, why do you have to go 200 miles away to get it? And again, I'm not putting you on the spot. I think we're in a period in our world, in our society, where that discussion should routinely take place, but it probably doesn't take place in most circumstances unless mom and dad happen to be like my mom and dad, who simply couldn't do it. There was no option. Now, today it's made worse because the kid can say, okay, mom, dad, thanks, I understand that, I appreciate it, but I'm going to borrow it. And do you, again, this is just a question. Do you think that parents have a serious conversation with their kids about the economic impact, costs, and results of what a college education can do relative to the cost of room and board and going away to living at home, which the thought of my kids living at home through those years would be a kind of encourage me. No, I think it's a good idea to go away. But beside that, the economic financial discussion, do you think it takes place?
I think it took place in our house. It's taking place this week in our house. And I know other friends of mine who are having similar conversations with their kids. But I also think the idea of going to certain schools is just very attractive to kids, like a name school or a school whose sports team you've always sort of been a fan of, or sort of like a destination. It's like a box they want to check for whatever reason, status, just sort of appeal. Maybe it's a particular subject that the school or maybe someone who they admire graduated from there, and they feel like, oh, maybe I could be like them if I go to this school. So, there's reasons that sort of there's emotional reasons that I think get in the way of those very sensible discussions.
Now, do you think it's changing? Now, you mentioned one of your daughters said maybe they didn't want to go to college. Do you think that dynamic is changing in terms of young people today? I have a limited sort of insights into that particular topic, but I would say there's probably a lot of kids who are questioning going to college, whether or not it's financial or because they just feel
that it's not worth 4 years of their time, or maybe they just, maybe there's something right in front of them that they want to do, and they can make money right out of high school, which was appealing to my daughter at the time.
Well, I think we are sometimes I ask myself, Tom, if you were 18 years old, would you go to college? And again, these questions are unique to families and unique to individuals. But I say to myself, there are a lot of my characteristics, my personality that might say, don't go to college. But knowing I just said that, I think I would probably be in that camp of alternatives, the junior college route, in the neighborhood, in the community, maybe even online. And I think that is changing. And we're beginning to have that question you brought up, Brendan. Is there an economic reason for doing this? Is there a financial payback for doing this? And I think it's now being shared by parents, too, who are looking at the hit they take in terms of their financial security. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I have 3 children. Only one went to college. You have 3. When I look at this whole dynamic now, and I look at what that might mean, not just for the debt that the child takes on, but the hit the family takes on in terms of their own financial security for those 25, 30 odd years that they're looking at living without a paycheck.
No, and also the idea that if the kids are going to go and the parents are going to be helping out, that they finish college because you're going to spend all this money and they're going to get halfway through and then they don't finish it. That's money down the drain. You don't get half a college degree for going for 2 years. So it's it's definitely something that I have spoken to our kids about, just like, all right, if you're going to go to college, we'll help you out, but you got to stick it out. And
right.
Also, don't necessarily pigeonhole yourself. I mean, so I think I mentioned I was an English major, sort of had a liberal arts education. And I think that really is a both a good thing and, because it sort of teaches you how to learn, teaches you how to sort of think about the world and write. But there's something to be said for going to business school or going to, engineering school, if that is your thing. And I think, we sort of have sort of touted the benefits of a liberal arts education. I grew up in a house where my father was a writer and my mother was a performer and then a business person later. But I never got the sort of economic insights that I think growing up in your house might have provided. But having having the thinking it in advance, planning ahead, as you said, I think before you pull that trigger on going to college is something I think a lot of people don't necessarily do. They just sort of feel like it's a compulsion. Oh, I got to go to college, and my dad went to college, and I got to go to college, or whatever. But I mean, the finances of it are a huge deal.
I want to interrupt here too, because I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm not in favor of college. I am. I would not be the person I am today if I didn't have the opportunity to go to college, and particularly the Wharton School. I met people at Wharton. They're not one of the top 10 business schools in the country for no reason. They attract business thinking people as young men and women. And when I think back on that, the people I went to classes with, experienced college life with, they were different. And it was the college part of it that provided me with it. So I want everyone to understand that this is not about anything except the costs associated with that. And the world has changed, and the costs are a lot greater today. I didn't pay to go to Wharton. I was fortunate enough to have a fellowship and tuition paid for. Those of you who are old enough remember Fell's Naphtha soap. Fell's was the business that endowed those fellowships and allowed that to happen. So there's no question there are enormous advantages, but the costs are also enormous. And they can really defy all logic. I could not have gone to school the way I went today as easily as I did. Not that it was easy, but there would be a whole lot more challenges associated with it. So the parents who are like you, who are having that conversation, it's a much more difficult challenge, and much more difficult because of all the things we've talked about here that come up, what they want to do, what their lives look like, the costs. Besides college now, you have 3 children who are about to go to college, and you mentioned you're 53 years old. Now what about your retirement? How does all that come together here?
Can I talk to you later about that?
Sure. No, well, I don't mean to put you on the spot. But there are a lot of people in your boat. And,
for sure.
I have that old saying I like to say: the toe we stubbed today always hurts more than the one we stubbed yesterday. So the stub toe, so to speak, today is how do we get through this challenge, and it hurts, but that stub toe, how we're going to survive when the next one occurs, paying for things that we're going to sacrifice today to get those kids through college is different, because a lot of your friends in situations like you're in, I was married when I was 22. So a lot of what people are facing at a much older age today, not too many generations ago, it was already done, passed with 10, 20 years of working to prepare for that retirement. A lot of people today don't have that luxury.
Yeah, I mean, I never had a pension. My wife had a pension, but they cut it off a while ago, so it's not it's not like previous generations. Social Security is in trouble. I don't want to go down that road, but just there's a lot of challenges that we're facing that are sort of not the things that help you fall asleep at night. I mean, I'm fortunate in that at least I've been sort of putting aside something, as have my wife, so we have somewhat of a plan. But I know a lot of people who are very much stressed out about retirement, and think they're going to be working until they're in their 90s.
Yeah, and when we're talking about the children too, when I started out my career, the maximum earnings that we paid Social Security on back in 1969-70 was around $7,000. Today, it's $160,200. Back then, we paid at a rate of about 3%, if my memory serves me correctly. Today, it's double that on a whole lot more money. So in terms of financial security that we're also asking our kids to be mindful of, get a degree, go to college, and now save for your financial futures, that's a big challenge too, because they're paying a working family today, they could be paying as much as $25,000 in income out to Social Security before they can get those dollars to invest on their own. So I like to say you can only spend $1 once. So our children have a much bigger challenge than we did, because we kept more of our money and we were able to decide what to do with it. debt plus the high cost of Social Security, it's a reality. It's a pay as you go. There's nothing to draw on. The younger generation's challenges are huge. Can't spend money they don't get.
No, yeah, well, and it's hard to save money when all your money is going out
Somewhere
the door
else.
to rent or whatever. You know,
Right.
as you said, if we were squirrels, we'd be dead. And I did say I'd come back to the squirrel story. Just how when you were recording that part of the audiobook, that chapter, we were getting this noise coming from the wall, and we were looking around like trying to figure it out and going over, was that you hitting your table or whatever? And it was a squirrel. But I think your point about the squirrel is well taken in that it's just very difficult to save those acorns for the winter if they're not coming in as fast as you need them to.
Well, Brendan, it's been great having you. I think we raised some questions here. There are no real easy answers. But I think, in all fairness, if moms and dads, grandparents can view this as a family problem and one that we want to instill in our young people the need and requirement to invest at an early age, recognizing the challenges they have with paying for college and recognizing the challenge of buying a home and all the rest of it, and preparing them in a wise way, I think we all win, and that's certainly something that's important to me in helping people understand. Thank you, Brendan, again. It's been a pleasure having you. I thank you for watching this podcast. This is Tom Curran. Goodbye with thanks.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Investing Ahead podcast with Tom Curran. Look for the Investing Ahead book and audiobook available everywhere. Executive producer Brendan Kennedy. Directed and produced by John Wager. Engineered and edited by Adam Russell and Aided Fitzsimmons. Filmed and recorded at Galileo Media Art Studios. Copyright 2024 Thomas Curran. All rights reserved. For more information, visit investingaheadpodcast.com.